Good day everyone, especially to you Ma'am Jade. In this video, we are going to present the historical development of international relations. I am Honey Jane and I am Honey Jane Belono-ac, and I will be presenting or discuss the emergence of international relations. So, historical development of international relations. The field of international relations emerged at the beginning of the 20th century, largely in the West, particularly in the United States, as that country grew in power and influence. So as it states, the emergence of international relations as a field of study began to the early 20th century after World War I, when the people realized the need to understand how countries interact to prevent future wars. It first developed in West, mainly in the US, United States, because ang US manggod is, as we all know, is powerful nga state, and ayon, gusto sab sa US na mag-study na how to manage or to influence the world or foreign affairs. Kung paunsa sila mag-interact politically and economically. Next is the study of international relations in the newly founded Soviet Union and later in Communist China was stultified by officially imposed Marxist ideology. So as we all know that the Soviet Union and the Communist China kay kuan man dyan sila kana ang mga singalan na komunista. So in communist countries like Soviet Union and China, the study of international relations was limited and controlled. So, dili siya ingon nga kuan jud ang pag-study sa international relation. Kana ang limited lang siya. Kay kuan, this is because government strictly followed Marxist ideology, which is naga-focus lang siya sa class struggle rather than cooperation sa states, between states. So for example, sa US, United Nations, universities like Harvard began teaching international relations in order to train diplomats and policymakers sa how to make relations in other country, unsaon paunsa sila og kanaang peaceful lang siya. In Soviet Union, scholars in Soviet Union were required to study international issues only from Marxist-Leninist perspective that focus on conflict between capitalist and socialist nations. So next is the West field flourished as the result of number factors. So first is a growing demand to find less dangerous and more effective means of conducting relations between peoples, societies, governments, and economies. So after devastating effects of World War I, countries wanted to find super and more peaceful ways to handle their international relations. So, they began to realize the conflict and wars could be avoided through diplomacy, negotiation, and international cooperation instead of violence. So, for example, namana din ni siya katong League of Nations, which nag-aim siya og kanaang or ay nag-promote og peace and prevent future wars through dialogue and collective decision makings. Next is the surge of writing and research inspired by the belief that systematic observation and inquiry could dispel ignorance and serve human betterment. So, many scholars and researchers in the West started studying international events. They use observation, nag-use sila of observation, analysis, in order to understand why wars, nganong mahitabo ang kanaang wars o unsa ang mga ways na ila ang buhaton para kanang ma-maintain ang kanang peace sa between nations. Next is, for example, Next is the population of political affairs, including foreign affairs. So, during the 20th century manggod, kanaang more people, daghan na ang interested sa sa global issues. So, newspapers, radio, and later televisions, natabang siya sa mga citizens para ma-stay informed about sa mga international events, unsa ang mga nahitabo dito. So, di ba ginabalita na siya. So, the citizens is informed na sila ug unsa ilang angay buhaton, unsa man ang mga nahitabo sa state, within state. So, because of this, political decisions were no longer just for leaders. So, dili lang ang leaders na ang mag-decide about politically to sa lain. They became part of public awareness and education. So, the citizen sa isa ka country, is part na siya sa public awareness ay ang mga newspapers, mga citizens, part na siya sa public awareness and education. Next is the traditional view that foreign and military matters should remain the exclusive preserved of rulers and other elites, yielded to the belief that such matters constituted an important concern and responsibility of all nations. So, before manggod nun, only ang leaders, ang rulers lang ang mag-handle sa foreign relations, foreign affairs, mga military affairs. Then, ang kanang mga ordinary people, mga citizens, is wala sila knowledge, naaman ka pero gamay ra. So, but over time, as the time goes, this traditional view has changed as people began to realize that international issues like war, trades, peace, na nag-a-affect na sa ilaang lives. So, this lead to belief that citizens should also be informed and involved in foreign affairs. As a result, education began to include lessons on global politics and diplomacy to help people understand and participate in international decisions. So, general education should include instruction in foreign affairs, that knowledge should be advanced for greater public control and oversight to the foreign and military policies. So, the advancement of public knowledge allowed citizens to exercise greater control and oversight, holding leaders accountable for their foreign decisions. So, if ang isa ka citizen is knowledgeable enough na na certain affairs or certain nga problema gipaon sa pagkuan. So ang rulers or ang leaders sa isa ka country is accountable na siya, accountable for their foreign policy decisions. Next is Woodrow Wilson's contribution. The new perspective was articulated by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson in 1913 to 1921 in his program for relations between the great powers following his settlement for World War I, known for his 14 points called the Open Covenants of Peace, openly arrived at, a place of the secret treaties that were believed to have contributed to the outbreak of war. So U.S. President Woodrow Wilson introduced the plan called the 14 Points to help create peace among nations. In his first points, so the Open Covenants of Peace openly arrived at. So dapat kuno that country should make peace agreements openly, dili lang kay kanang dili siya secretly na nag-make of decisions. So kay if secret deals between nations can outbreak for the war, makakos siya og kanaang war. So the massive destruction from World War I made leaders realize that people didn't know enough about how countries interact. Because of this, they believed that universities should study and teach international relations to promote better understanding, peace, and cooperation between or among the nations. So, next, international relations scholarship prior to World War I was conducted primarily in two loosely organized branches of learning. First is the diplomatic history that emphasized the uniqueness of international events and the methods of diplomacy as it was actually conducted. So before World War I manggod, the study of international nag-focus siya sa duha ka kanaang areas, which is siya, international history and international law. Diplomatic history rather. Diplomatic history studied how countries interact with one another in the past, about history man siya. In the past, through negotiations, treaties, alliances, and conflicts. It focused on the action and decision of leaders, ambassadors, and governments in shaping foreign policy and international relations. So, ito siya. Next is the international law, especially the law of war, viewed as the source of fundamental normative standards of international conduct. So international law, as we all know, it is a set of rules and principles that guide how countries interact with each other. So, nag-ingon siya nga nations, unsa ang ilang buhaton ug unsa ang dili sa time na ay kuan ka ng negotiations or war. Then international law is help siya to maintain fairness, quality, and peace internationally within the States. So before World War I, it mainly focused only on the law of war. The law of war. That ang rules lang is about how war should be fought and how peace treaties should be made. Later, later in international relations, they expanded to the law to include the human rights, trading, and etc. So in conclusion, the emergence of international relations mark as an important change in how people understand global affairs. It began in early 20th century as countries realized the need to study peace, cooperation, and diplomacy after the devastation of World War I. From its roots, in diplomatic history and international law, the field of international relations grew to nag-include na siya og politics, economics, and ang rules sa usa ka citizens in shaping world issues. This development is nagatabang sa nations to promote better understanding, prevent ang war or conflicts, and work together for global peace and progress. So that would be all for my part, and the next topic will be discussed by Miss Fatima Shatan. Thank you.
Everyone, my assigned topic is about the international relations between the two world wars. So the period between the two world wars saw a significant focus on international relations, driven by the need to understand and prevent future conflicts. So after World War I, people really wanted to understand how countries interacted to avoid another war. Then, the 1920s witnessed the establishment of new centers, institutes, schools, and university departments dedicated to teaching and research in international relations across Europe and North America. In the 1920s, new schools and programs for studying international relations popped in Europe and America. So in private organizations played also a partial role by promoting the study of international relations through grants supporting scholarly journals, training institutes, conferences, and university research. So organizations and people with money help fund research and learning about international relations. So the aftermath of World War I led to insecurity of its causes, access to government archives from Imperial Russia and Germany enabled scholars to piece together the history of pre-war alliances, secret diplomacy, and military planning. So researchers use old government papers to figure out what led to the war. So let's proceed to the notable works included. So some important books on the topic were, first, we have here Sidney Bradshaw Face, The Origins of the World War, 1928. The second one is the Bernadette P. Schmidt's The Coming of the War, 1914-1930, and Triple Alliance and Triple Intent, 1934. This is the number 3. Superior Renovance, The Immediate Origins of the War, 1928. Then Winston Churchill's The World Crisis, in 1923 to 29. And the last one we have here, Arnold G. Joinby's The World After the Peace Conference in 1925. So a book by Sidney Bradshaw Face is about the start of the war. Then the books of Bernadette Kint is by Bernadette Kint about the events leading up to war and alliances involved. Then the third one, which is Pierre Renovin's, a book by Pierre Renovin about what immediately caused the war. And then we have here Winston Churchill's, a book by Winston Churchill about the global crisis of the war. And then the last one, we have Arnold G. Toynbee's, which a book about what happened after the peace talks. So let's proceed to the League of Nations. The newly formed League of Nations became a focal point of study with international relations schools explicitly created to train civil servants for international governance. Research focused on the League's genesis, organizations, historical precedents in international federations, and the analysis of challenges in international organizations and law. So the new League of Nations was studied a lot, and schools were created to train people to work with it. So studies look at how the League started, how it worked, and what problem is faced. So in conclusion, the interwar period was marked by concerted effort to understand the dynamics of international relations, driven by the lessons of World War I and the establishment of new international institutions. So the time between the wars was all about trying to understand how countries work together because of the war and new organizations like the League of Nations. So the studies of new schools helped created a base of learning more about international relations in the future. So let's proceed to the interwar international relations, a shift in perspective. So interwar scholarship on international relations was shaped by the peace movements, rising dictatorships, and the threat of World War II, leading to evolving perspective. People studied about how countries worked together between the two world war was changed because of the desire for peace, the rise of strong leaders, and the fear of another war. So from idealism to realism, early focus on the causes of war and integrating social sciences gave way to criticism of idealistic approaches as the League of Nations faltered and aggressive regimes emerged. Realism gained prominence. So the early focus on why wars happen and bringing in ideas from other fields like sociology changes as the League of Nations failed and dictators rose to power. People started to think more realistically about how countries act. Realism gained prominence. Thinking about things realistically became more popular. So, scholarship broadened to include causes of war, minority issues, nationalism, imperialism, geopolitics, the military-industrial complex, and economic inequality. So, studies started looking at more things like why wars happen, problems with minorities, nationalism, imperialism, how location affects power, the link between the military and industries, and the gap between rich and poor countries. So, for notable contributions, scholars like Harold D. Laswell foreshadowed post-World War II. So, scholars like Harold D. Laswell foreshadowed post-World War II international relations studies. Some researchers like Harold D. Laswell had ideas that were ahead of their time and hinted at what international relations studies would look like after World War II. So in conclusion, interwar international relations scholarship transformed from idealistic to realistic approaches, broadening its scope and laying the groundwork for future studies. So the way people studied how countries work together between the war's change from being hopeful to being more realistic, started looking at more topics, and set the stage for future studies. So that's all, and thank you.
Ma'am, this is my topic, scholarly conditions of international relations. And the scholarly conditions of international relations are referred to core ideas, treaties, and historical events and scholars used to understand how countries interact with each other. For example, ang China powerful siya kaysa sa Philippines. Unang mas influensya siya pagka country. Unary thinkers, scholars like Harold D. Larswell, Abraham Gardiner, Frederick L. Scoman, Quincy Wrights, and L. H. Carr, a lead intellectual at downward for modern international relations o international relationship, exploring psychological, autopolitical, and realized perspective. Next, key contributions. Laswell linked politics to psychological symbols and perceptions. Harold D. Laswell explored how symbols, perceptions, and psychological imagery shape words, politics, thinking, political behavior to substitutions. So next, Gardiner introduced cultures and personality theory. Abraham Gardiner introduced the cultures and personality approach using anthropology to explain how culture traits influence international behavior. So next, Scoman blended analysis with culture events and style used to dig. Frederick L. Scoman, a combined analysis commentary with real-time international events meant to style used by foreign policy analysis journalists. So, next one, Wright made early term-based international research. Quincy Wright led one of the first base research project international focusing on war and international behavior, a thought systematic study. And next, Carr and others cited the realist power politics approach. E.H. Carr, along with others, developed the realist power politics theory, emphasizing national interests and power as central to international relations. So next one, Salvador D. Magariga highlighted the decision disconnected between international relations theory and real-world diplomacy based on his of nation experience. Salvador D. Madariaga critiqued the gap between idealistic international relation theory and practical diplomacy, drawing from his League of Nations experience. Next, impact World War II scholar were recruited for intelligence, propaganda, and planning. Applying theory to real world strategy. The wars spurred scientific inquiry and in technological advance like computers that later influence international relations study. So, ang pagkauman sa World War II, so nangitag idealistic ang mga scientific na magtinguha sila og makita ang dakong idea ba ito nila rin. Next, post-war international relationship accepted for POLSCI, seeking overarching theories to explain to global politics beyond fragmented case study. Post-World War II expansions of international relations during strategic stability and nuclear deterrence, the risk of nuclear weapons prompted influential theories on deterrence, notably by Bernard Buday, Herman Kahn, Glenn Sander, Thomas Sealing, Henry Kissinger,
Ayaw kay pagpalayo.
and Albert Rostetter. This scholar shaped how states think about nuclear weapons, not just tools of war, but as instrument of deterrence. Okay, next, border thematic developments, the European integrations and the evolutions of supranational institutions. European integrations, warriors, international relations, scholar focus on how European countries began forming supranational institutions like European Union to promote peace, cooperations, and shared government after World War II, especially like NATO, study the military alliance like NATO functioned to ensure collective security, determining aggressions to unified defense commitment. Ideological conflicts shaping global alignments. Ideological conflicts, Cold War alliance explored how ideologies like democracy versus communism shape a global alliance, viralities, and foreign policy decisions. Foreign policy decisions meetings failed to study. Foreign policy decisions making behavioral and cognitive theories investigated how leaders and government make choices in international affairs using psychology, theoretically, and rational models.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, classmates. So in this afternoon, we tackled about the post-war ascendancy of realism. So it means that after World War II daw, realism became the main way to understand global politics. Led by Hans Morgenthau, it focused on protecting a country's interest and power. In a world without rules, realism rejects idealistic ideas and guided so Cold War decisions and academic discussion. So Hans J. Morgenthau's book Politics Among Nations provide a foundational framework for realist theory in international relations. So it means that after World War II, Morgenthus explained how countries act mainly to protect themselves as a gain power. His book became a guide for understanding politics. Like, for example, his ideas helped to shape U.S. foreign policy during the Cold War, focusing on strength and survival. And the second one is other key contributors in the post-war period include Arnold Wolfers, George F. Kennan, Robert Strauss-Howe, Henry Kissinger, and Reynold Niebuhr. So it means that these thinkers added their own views about strategies, leadership, and how countries should behave in a dangerous world. Like, for example, George Kennan promoted containment to stop Soviet expansion, while Kissinger used realist ideas to manage the U.S. relationship with China and the Soviet Union. And the second one is the current concept of realism. So all forms of realism emphasize the national interest and the struggle for the power. So it means countries act to protect their own needs and compete for power. So like, for example, there are two countries may fight over the control of oil and rich land to secure energy resources. And the second one is the realism views the international system as anarchic, where states rely on their own power to secure interests. So it means this, there is no world government to enforce rules, so each country must look out for itself. Like, for example, if one country is invaded, it cannot call a global police. It must defend itself or seek help for allies. And the third one is the primary national interest is a state survival, protecting its people, political system, and territory. So a country down to top priority is to protect its people, government, and land for threats. Like, for example, the Philippines' strength is military and patrol its water to protect its territory in the West Philippine Sea. And the fourth one is secondary interests include cultural and economic preservations. So it means that countries also care about preserving their traditions and keeping their economy strong. Like, for example, South Korea. South Korea promotes its cultural exports like K-pop and films while investing in technology to grow its economy. And the fifth one is power struggles reflect human nature and manifest as either collaborations or alliances or competition or conflict. So it means countries may work together if there is investment, match or clash if they compete. So, like, for example, ASEAN members from alliances to promote regional stability, while rival nations may argue over the borders or trade. And the sixth one is effective leadership can manage conflicts by prioritizing national goals and negotiating accommodations. So, strong leaders can reduce interventions by setting clear goals and negotiating with others. So it means that example is a president may choose diplomacy over war, protect a national interest, and maintain peace with neighboring countries. So the last topic is about realism versus ideological crusades. Realists argue that survival depends on national interest and accurate assessment of power. So it means a country should focus on protecting themselves by making smart decisions based on their actual strength, not emotional or idealistic goals. Like, for example, a small country might avoid joining a war even if it supports one side because it could be too risky for its own safety. And the second one is ideological crusades, or global communism or democracy can distract from core interests and destabilize the international system. So it means that trying to spread big ideas like communism or democracy worldwide can lead to conflict, especially when other countries don't agree. Like, for example, during the Cold War, the US promoted democracy and the Soviet Union pushed out communism. This caused proxy wars in a place like Vietnam and Afghanistan. And the third one is realism opposes idealist efforts to promote universal trust and cooperation viewing them as unrealistic given human nature. So realists daw believe people and countries naturally compete is unrealistic. Like for example, even friendly countries like the US and Canada sometimes argue over trade or border issues, showing that trust has limits. And the fourth one is the realist-idealist debate faded fast due to the lack of compelling new idealist theories later emerging as a divide between neoliberal institutionalism and neorealist structuralism. So, after idealism, because this popular later, the debate returned in a new form. Neoliberal institutions believe countries can work together through organizations like the UN or ASEAN, and that there are two, which is the kato kay mo to siya ang neoliberal institution, and the second one is a neorealistic structuralist believe global politics is still shaped by power and competition. Like for example, neoliberal support climate change agreements like the Paris Accord, while neorealists says countries will only join if it benefits their own national interests. And the last is it's all about expansion of area studies and limits of realism. So from the 1950s, the US invested heavily in area studies to support Cold War strategy, focusing on regions like the Soviet Union, China, Africa, and Northern Asia. So it means that in 1950s now, the US funded area studies to better understand regions like Soviet Union, China, and Africa, and Northeast Asia during the Cold War. Like for example, university trained expert in Chinese language and politics to help guide to U.S. foreign policy. And the second one is the scholars specialized in regional histories, politics, culture, and languages, often sideline theoretical debate. So it means that scholars focus more on real-world knowledge like history and culture than on abstract theories like realism. Like for example, researchers studying African politics might look at tribal customs and colonial history instead of just power based on theory. So that's all. Thank you.